Welcome to The Real Life Buyer. Whether you are buying for yourself or your business, here you will find tips, techniques and knowledge to support your journey to buying smart. Interviewing business owners and technical experts to give you information and guidance before parting with your money. Save money, time and get what you want when you want it. Now introducing The Real Life Buyer, Dave Barr.
Hello and welcome to The Real Life Buyer. Today, I have the pleasure of talking to Candice and Lauren Henry, who are top-rated university professors of leadership and co-founders of Aretios, a company dedicated to helping entrepreneurs and young professionals learn how to lead well and live the life they were designed for. These ladies bring over a decade of study in leadership and personal growth and 13 years of experience as leadership trainers. Through their work as success and influence strategists, Candice and Lauren help people clarify their purpose and develop their influence so they can live a life full of success, excitement, and meaning. Today, our primary topic will be how to design and achieve the results you're looking for through goals. So, hi, Candice and Lauren, and welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having us, Dave. We're excited to be here.
Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. Would you mind giving the listeners some background of your journey and the creation of your company, Aretios?
Sure. So we're sisters. And so growing up, our parents were some of the first to introduce us to leadership and personal growth at a young age. And it was then that we started to experience some of the powerful, positive impacts that it can have on a person's life. And so that really inspired us to want to learn more about leadership and to continue applying personal development strategy to our lives. And Lauren and I both attended an international leadership training program for several years, and then went on to become leadership trainers for young adults. And then we loved it so much that we were wanting to continue to kind of thrive and live in this world of leadership training. And so we went on to get our master's degrees in executive leadership.
And now we teach courses as university professors. And as we were doing that, we saw that there was a bit of a need for a younger voice in this conversation to bring insight in these areas to the next generation. And that's what inspired us to start our company, Aretios, where, as you mentioned, we work as success and influence strategists, helping to teach young professionals how to lead well and live the life they were designed for.
A lot of people want to know where the name Aretios came from. So we always think it's kind of fun to tell the story behind it.
Yeah, so it's actually inspired by a Greek word, arete, which means to do everything with an attitude of excellence and virtue. And so aretios is the idea of living life to its fullest potential and doing everything with excellence and purpose.
Oh, sounds fantastic. So did the inspiration purely come from within yourselves, would you say, or were there other external influences that impacted upon your life to sort of ignite your passion and your motivation for this kind of work?
I think we've been really blessed to have a lot of incredible mentors and people in our lives who really help to unveil that to us and show us that this is a better way of living and you can choose who you want to be and how you want to live. Our parents certainly were that for us, and many other people were kind of placed around us through different seasons of life that definitely encouraged us to continue on that journey.
And then I think you have to also, it has to be inside of you as well. So there were people, like Candice said, who introduced us to it, but then we, kind of took hold of it ourselves and said, okay, this is something that really means something to us. And it kind of shifted from the external motivation to the internal motivation, where then we said, not only do we want to do this, we want to study this, and then we want to make this part of our career and how we give back to people.
Oh, it's fantastic. There's so many thought leaders, inspirational people. As you say, it's very nice to see somebody who's so much younger, shall we say, and more passionate than perhaps others. So, okay, let's get on to the topic in hand, goals. So from your perspective, why are goals so important? And what do you believe are the trickiest aspects about them?
Well, goals are an essential part of life for us because they really help us to be able to focus our efforts, and it really streamlines our decision-making process as well. But it's interesting because despite goals being something that is a very popular topic for professionals in really any industry, most people actually set their goals incorrectly. And so then they don't end up getting the results that they're really looking for. And that's because most people follow what we like to call the set it and forget it method, where they just set it and then they really do kind of forget about it. Life happens and then they're like, oh, right, I was supposed to be working on this goal. And that obviously does not help them to get to where they want to be.
So we use a tool called PACT, and this kind of addresses what we think are the main difficulties, what we've seen in all of our study and work with clients, that are the trickiest parts that people are missing. So PACT stands for you need a plan of action. So that's P. A lot of people don't come up with the step-by-step actions that they need to take in order to reach their goal. So that could be one of the things they're missing. A stands for accountability. Studies show that if we have accountability sort of factored into our life, I guess you would say, if you have a scheduled time to meet up with someone, it makes you 95% more likely to achieve your goals. So that's a really huge statistic. So accountability is one of the things that a lot of people miss. And then C.
C stands for consistency. And that's really the secret to getting results of any kind. You have to be consistent. I like to think of it as consistent, persistent effort, continuing to show up. That's how you get the results that you want. And T stands for time. And with time, we have to look at some sort of a deadline that we're aiming for, right? If we don't have an endpoint, how do we know if we've reached our goal or if we need to make some adjustments? And also checking that quality and quantity of time. A lot of times we see people giving up too soon because they haven't put in enough time, enough of that consistent effort towards the goal. They just need to give it perhaps another week, another month, perhaps even another year before saying, oh, I'm just going to give up now. So time is a really important metric to consider.
Yeah, so when people aren't getting the results that they want, it's usually because they're missing one of those four things.
Okay. So do you think the structure that I think we've all been taught, the SMART objectives, the SMART goals, is that a little bit outdated now? Or do you think there's still, that's still the right thing to do, but add in the PACT element?
Yeah, I think there's still definitely merit to it. I think what sometimes happens though is that people try to do the whole thing by themselves and they're missing something like accountability. And we can often know what we need to do, but then talk ourselves out of doing it. We rationalize excuses. And so something like that can help. That's an element that's not necessarily represented in the SMART acronym.
Right. Do you think we try to set goals that are too big? So the classic, the elephant size goal. And of course, because we don't achieve the elephant size goals, we've missed all these opportunities for these small goals, successes.
Absolutely. I think that's a really big sticking point for a lot of people is they don't really think about the realistic aspect of it. And you don't want to be so realistic that you don't give yourself a challenge, but you also don't want to be so you don't want to think too broadly, and then it's very difficult, like you're mentioning, to get any forward momentum, and that ends up keeping people from wanting to continue to set goals because they're like, I never achieve any of these. This is so frustrating. So trying to find that happy medium of knowing what does challenge you and does get you to push yourself a little bit, but also is attainable as well.
That's where that plan of action comes in. We like to say, if you reverse engineer, and work backwards, and then you figure out, okay, maybe your overall goal is that really big elephant sized goal, but let's just start by getting these first few steps done. And then you can still achieve the big thing, but not be demotivated by something that just seems overwhelming.
Yeah. So you get some small successes and therefore the energy and motivation to continue on the journey, even though it may be difficult. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so what would you say is the one thing you consider will have the most impact when trying to achieve your goals?
I think that being thoughtful about your consistency is really the biggest thing. At least I've seen that in my own life. When I decide to show up day in and day out, even when there is a challenging day or a challenging moment, choosing to kind of give yourself that check-in and say, why am I doing this? What is the real reason behind my effort, behind my energies here? Why am I investing so much of myself, my time into this? Checking in with that getting clear on that why again, and then saying, okay, this is why I'm choosing to show up each and every day, even in the tough moments, has been huge in terms of getting results.
And I think with consistency too, even if it's not, every day, you don't always have your A game. But if you're still showing up and you're building the habit, then you're still going to be there. That way you don't, a lot of people strive for perfection. And then if they slip up one day, they throw the whole thing away. And instead, if you just, okay, do the best you can that day, that maybe you're not feeling it, but you still went, maybe we're talking about, a gym goal, you still went to the gym. Maybe you didn't do the whole routine, but you still got there. You're still building that habit. And then you don't feel like the whole thing is a waste.
Okay. We tend to set quite a few goals for ourselves, and therefore you struggle perhaps how to prioritize them. And then I personally, I know I'm guilty of this, is that I can see a new thing come along and think, oh, perhaps that's better than the old thing. And you get distracted, diverted, and then you're completely off track. So how do you think you could avoid doing that? And how would you say is the best way to prioritize your goals?
I think one of the things that we do is we're really big about clarifying purpose. So when we are super clear on exactly who it is that we're becoming and where we're going, that kind of helps us to serve as our line in the sand of, does this line up with where we want to go and the kind of person we're trying to be? Because like you said, there can be a lot of that shiny object syndrome where there's something that comes along and it looks really great. But if it's not going to help us make progress towards the direction that we're trying to go, then we sometimes have to make that hard decision and say, that looks really amazing, but it's not on brand, or it's not on purpose, or it's not, going to help me get what I ultimately want.
Right. Okay. I'm thinking about distractions now, because that's something that we're all constantly overwhelmed by. Our phones are the worst, probably, gadgets that ever existed in that respect. So how do you make sure you try and avoid those distractions, other than the switching your phone off? That's obviously an obvious answer. So let's say you work with intention on your goals. What sort of tools and techniques do you do to try and keep on track?
One of the things that I really like to use is what we call the sticky note strategy. And it's so simple, but it works so well. And that is basically taking whatever task you're doing, and when different ideas or different thoughts of things, to-do list ideas come into your mind and try to distract you from what the task at hand is, I always keep a sticky note, or you can put this into your phone digitally, or a notepad of some kind next to my workspace. And so I write all of those ideas down when I have them, because chances are I will not remember them when I come back to it later on. So I write it down in the moment, and then I continue working on what I'm working on. And then when I do have time later to go back, and I can say, oh, what was that idea that I had? Or what's the one task that I needed to do? Then it's all there in one place. And so I'm still able to stay focused, but I also have all of my ideas and notes that I need at hand as well.
And that's the idea of being able to focus on what's important and not just what's urgent, that concept that a lot of people talk about. But we often use that sticky note strategy in conjunction with time blocking. So we will, if there is a certain task that needs to get done, we'll say, okay, for this 2-hour block, we're going to work on that. And then if we have those ideas that come up, or an email pops in, that goes on the sticky note. And so we can still get the main task done, but then not worry about forgetting something, which is why a lot of people end up just diverting their attention and working on the email that came in instead of the main task at hand.
Yeah, I've heard you actually can't multitask, which is very contrary to what many of us believe. But you actually end up task switching really rapidly, and it makes it difficult for your brain to actually get into that flow state when you're switching back and forth really quickly like that. So being really thoughtful about focus on whatever task is at hand can really help you get to your best work and help you get into that productive state.
Yeah, I think of a train, like if you're trying to stop a train and then start it again and stop and start, you lose all of that momentum that you could get by, being focused on one task, and then suddenly become very powerful and very productive.
Yeah, I tend to use a I think a combination of things. So let's say if I'm in meetings, I will write down a list of all the actions or the actions that I should do.
Yes.
I tend to block out time in my diary to try and make sure there's certain things I must try and achieve each day. And I purposely try and build in time in between those, because sometimes you can go over plan, but when you achieve something earlier, it's fantastic because you've got more time than you expected.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But
that's the best.
exactly, yeah, exactly as you say, though, the one thing I love about the sticking out idea, and I'm always doing this, is that as I did today, I had about 5 or 6 sticky notes on my desk or on the top of my laptop. And it's the satisfaction I find of when you've done something, just to take that sticky note and throw it in the bin. And you
Yes.
have a visible reduction in activities you must do. And you know you've achieved them because there's this little pile of sticky notes on the one side that are done.
Yes,
Yes.
that is the best feeling ever.
At least I feel I've done something anyway. There
Yes.
you go. Okay. One of the things that is talked about a lot is procrastination. And it's something that we all do to smaller or lesser or much bigger degrees. So, what advice would you give someone who wanted to try and overcome the terrible word of procrastination?
One of the things that I have lived by forever is the philosophy of pay now and play later. And it's so simple, but if you can internalize that and make that switch instead of playing first and then paying later, it will make a world of difference for you. I think this is something that all of society probably needs to relearn, because there's so much focus on doing what feels good right now instead of doing what needs to be done. And so for me, if I get the task done first, then I can fully enjoy the leisure activity or whatever it is. But if I try to do that first, it's always like hanging in the back of my head. I can't fully enjoy what I wanted to be doing because I'm thinking about what I should be doing, that to-do list or those tasks that need to be done. So if you can make that switch, I think that will help a lot with procrastination.
The other thing is going back to that idea of looking at the whys, sort of like what we talked about a few minutes ago. That's such a powerful way to kind of switch your focus from maybe the thing that you're putting off is somewhat unpleasant and that's why you don't want to be doing it. But if you think about the exciting result that you can actually get when you do that task, or that the steps that will lead you to that task, it's a lot more of the right thing to focus on that ends up creating that motivation that will hopefully get you going and taking advantage of the moment you have to work on that task. Another thing is accountability. That's so valuable with overcoming procrastination, because when you check in with someone, you have to tell them either, yes, I did this, or no, I did not. And so when we're by ourselves, we can easily rationalize why we shouldn't do something. We can talk ourselves out of the task. But when we have that form of accountability, I found that it boosts my commitment a whole lot more, and it will really strengthen that resolve to say, okay, I'm going to do it. I am showing up. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there.
Cool, like that. So a lot of people set goals and try to create new habits, particularly, we say, at the beginning of a new year. But then, of course, as January tends to dwindle away, we find it incredibly difficult to achieve these things in a long-lasting way. What do you think could be causing this? And how could one try and fix or minimize this problem?
A lot of this is connected to our words and what we speak about ourselves or our situation. We saw this in a particular individual that we worked with, and her conversations and the way that she spoke about herself really held her back. She tried to move past certain things in her life, but her words were verbalizing herself as a victim of the challenges in her life. And that kept her from making those necessary changes that she really wanted to make.
So what we recommend in a situation like this is when someone is finding it difficult to make those lasting changes, it goes down into the beliefs that they hold inside of themselves. So if they want something really badly, but deep inside they don't believe it's possible for them, the efforts end up being futile. So one of the things that we use is the power of affirmations, and that's just speaking truth to combat those limiting beliefs, those neuro pathways that we've created in our brain by reinforcing reinforcing new thought patterns that are going to help us achieve the positive growth and build the new habits that we want.
Words really create the world in which we live. That's kind of a little statement that we like to live by and encourage our clients to also think about as well. And so a really easy way to start living by that is to just become aware of what our thoughts and our words are. Catch yourself when you find yourself reinforcing a belief that's limiting about who you are or who you want to be, and set a new direction. Once we are able to catch that thought, then say, nope, that's not who I am becoming. That's not who I am. And change the direction, switch your thoughts and think about, what do I want to become? Who do I want to be? And then start reinforcing that. Now, this is usually very unnatural at first, especially if you're not used to doing that. But over time, as Lauren was mentioning, you end up reprogramming your mind. Those neural pathways will change to then start being in accordance with that new truth. So it's very, very powerful.
Yeah, our unconscious mind doesn't know the difference between something that is true or something that is make believe. So it just takes in whatever we give it. So if we tell ourselves, oh, you messed up again, you can't do that, we're just reinforcing that with negative self-talk. But if we instead, switch it, and like Candice said, it's a little tricky at first, and you should replace it, not just say, oh, I said it again, but switch, no, I can do this, and I am going to get it right, I am going to figure it out. Then you reprogram, and those pathways become stronger, and your brain will then believe that and help you to start to act in that direction.
Yeah, I tend to use two things that work for me. I tend to put the word yet at the end of a sentence. So if I think I haven't achieved something yet, then it's not so much of a negative. Mm-hmm. The other thing I try and do, and I try to visualize, is if I've said something that is negative, I imagine that's a piece of paper that has been written down on. I scrunch it up and I throw it away. And as I throw it away, it ignites, it burns. So that's my sort of internal symbolism of saying this is the wrong thing to say, the wrong belief to have. It's now destroyed and I can move on. And it kind of helps me a little bit. Is that something other people tend to do, or if they have other things that are quite neat ways of dealing with it?
Yeah.
I love that idea of the visualization. I use that too. And sometimes I'll visualize something similar, or even like an X. It's like, nope, that's not the belief. And then I immediately think about the belief that I do want. And our mind thinks in pictures. So being able to clearly visualize what that new thing is a really powerful way to then kind of replace that old thought with the new right thing to believe.
I've also visualized something similar, kind of like how you would throw it away, but I would just think of like throwing it off of like a ship, and it just, goes down the balcony and just gone, yeah, gone with the wind.
Excellent. As long as it's destroyed, that's the thing,
exactly.
Isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So, because I believe success is a direct result of some of the things you mentioned, our daily habits. I think it's our mindset and our attitude. I think for me, that combination is quite powerful. How long do you think it takes to establish a routine that helps you to stay on the path, so to speak? A lot of people talk about 30 days of doing something, every day. Is it 60? Is it 90? Is it different for everybody? What's your thought about that?
I think it could be different for each person, and depending on what kind of habit you're building. Like you said, studies show anywhere from around like 21 to 30 plus days is sort of that average time period. So definitely, I would say if you're working on a new habit, at least try and commit to, at least 3 weeks. That way you're getting in a solid pattern and rhythm in your life. But some habits, if it's not something you're doing every day, then you're going to need more time. If it's more of a weekly thing, so it kind of depends on what the action itself is. And if you're someone who has maybe in the past, gone for a streak and then dropped off and then completely fallen off the bandwagon, then maybe you need to really make sure you have accountability a little further down the road to keep you on track.
Yeah. I think of, for example, gym membership. How many times have I sort of registered with a gym, and I've been great, and I've managed to go every day for weeks and weeks, sometimes well beyond month, 2 months, 3 months even. But all it takes, I find, is something that throws you off course for a period of time. It could be an illness, it could be a family matter, it could be you've got to go away with work, you've got to travel with work.
Right.
And just that disturbance makes it very difficult to come back to that routine. And I think a lot of people suffer with that. It's trying to find out, how do they return to that pattern again? Is it just pure, your own self will, your attitude? Or are there other things that could snap you back into routine, do you think?
I think that's such a good point. And I've even done the same thing myself. If you know something like you're going away or you're going to be going on travel, something that you can see in advance, unlike a family emergency,
Yeah.
then maybe you can contact a friend. If you're going to the gym, say, hey, can you just check in with me when I come back?
Good
Make
idea.
sure that I know.
Yeah.
Because I've done that before too. Been in a routine, go on a trip, come back, and suddenly that pattern is gone.
Right.
So yeah, something that you can foresee, I would do that. Or if it's something that comes up, maybe text a friend and say, hey, something happened. Can you just check in with me like a week from now and see if I'm going? Just because that extra outside accountability makes you suddenly feel like you need to deliver and you need to have an answer and come back to that. So that can be really helpful.
I also schedule things into my calendar. Again, if this is something that's planned ahead and okay, I'm going and coming, setting it as a meeting is a great thing to do. And it helps me to say, okay, I've allocated this time and now I need to follow through on my commitment because this is a commitment to me. Right. And so we have to value ourselves just as much as we value a meeting with anybody else. And then also just going back to that end goal and saying, okay, where do I want to go? And evaluating that. Is that important to me? If yes, then this is a necessary step that I need to take on that journey to getting there. And when we kind of reframe things through that lens of that end goal, I found personally that that's really motivating for me to say, okay, I'm going to make a point to show up at the gym, or I'm going to invest my time learning this or reading this. And it just helps me to stay on track.
Yeah. I think the relationships thing is quite strong with me. I was, and until the class finished, which is the only reason why I stopped, I started going to a boxercise class. And after a few weeks, you start to get used to people because you're pairing up and you're having a chat, and then you become more personal. And when you tend to go the next time, you say, hey, how you doing? You catch up, and then you start the class again. And before long, because of that relationship, you feel almost obligated to be there just to say hi, check in with the other person and such. So there's your accountability side of things, but it's self-accountability there. They're not demanding something of you, but you feel obligated to continue your friendship and continue that relationship. And I found when your partner can't make it, you feel almost lost, because this is the person I do boxercise with. Where on earth are they? I've got to go with somebody else. It's my goodness, what's going on here? So yeah.
That's such a good point, Dave. And I love that idea. And I think if we can all think about how to apply that to other things that we do, maybe it's personal growth, maybe it's something that we're trying to learn for a professional skill. How can we apply that idea of community that brings the accountability? And then that will help us get the results that we're looking for.
Yeah, it's funny. I was only talking this weekend with my mother, and she tends to go to a slimming club. And even though she enjoys the club, what she's really going for is the friendship. Because all the ladies encourage each other to try and achieve and to go. And again, you want to go because your friends are there and you keep that connection. So it doesn't matter how old or how young you are, the sooner you establish a relationship, then I think that encourages you to keep going all the time.
It makes everything more fun too.
It does.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's nothing worse than going to the gym and you're just you. It's you with yourself and perhaps a bit of music. You're so easily distracted. You've got to fight over the equipment or whatever. And yeah.
And you can talk yourself out of, I'm not feeling it. I'm done.
Yeah. I think I've got a pain in my shoulder.
Right?
I won't do that.
Right. Yeah. Whereas if you have a coach or your friend, your partner in boxercise saying, no, we're doing one
Yeah,
more, we're doing one more.
absolutely. And I think when people say you've got skin in the game, as you paid something, doesn't always work. And I find just because you paid for something doesn't mean you feel obligated to go. There isn't that personal connection. But,
yeah, I definitely agree.
okay. Another thing I've noticed is you have something called the Daily. Could you tell me more about the Daily and who it's really focused for?
So the Daily is a guided journal that walks you through the 4 power practices of gratitude, goals, affirmation, and reflection. And so we found that this is part of the success habits of people who have achieved incredible things throughout all of history and in various types of discipline.
So we created this because after we were studying the lives of all these people, we found that these are common habits. And while there are a lot of things that we know that are good for us that we should do, it can be hard to stick to them. And you talked about earlier how habits are so important in creating our success. So we said, okay, we want to figure out how to add this to our daily routines without making it difficult and complicated. So we created the Daily where everything's in one place. It takes us all of 5 or 10 minutes in the morning and the evening, and we're able to start our day with gratitude, which studies show us we can't be stressed and grateful at the same time. So when we have the right perspective, it kind of helps us to see our day with the proper lens. And then we write down our goals. So that helps us to stay focused. We talked a lot about goals already. And then affirmations to affirm who we're becoming and where we're going. And then at the end of the day, we come back and reflect. And I think that's one of those forgotten disciplines for a lot of people. But really successful leaders are the ones who look back and they think through everything that they did each day and they glean the wisdom from it. And that's how you end up with valuable experience instead of 1 year repeated over and over and over again because you didn't learn those lessons. So that's what the Daily is all about. And we have people from, age 18 to like 90 using it and loving it. So it's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's something that's perhaps a little bit unusual in the UK is affirmations. It's something that's not so prevalent. And we're hearing more and more of it now, and it's coming through on some podcasts. So do you explain to the listeners, certainly for the UK audience, about an affirmation and its value? What should be within an affirmation? What are you telling yourself with this?
So with affirmations, we like to declare positive qualities that we want to be true about ourselves. So we typically phrase ours as, I am a person of XYZ. So you could, or say you want to be more punctual. A lot of people have a hard time showing up on time to things. So you could say, I'm a person who is punctual and I always arrive early or on time to events. And what it does is it's giving your mind the right input. We talked a little bit earlier about how the brain doesn't know the difference between something true or something make believe. And so when we can help to reinforce the right qualities that we want to be true about ourselves, that helps to shape the direction and the actions that we take. So it's all about self-talk. Sometimes people think talking to yourself is weird, but if you think about it, we are all having an internal dialogue all the time. And so all it is instead of saying, I'm just going to let whatever's around me shape those thoughts, you're being intentional about making them positive and helping to direct the growth that you want to see in your life.
Well, why do you think people find it so easy to be negative about themselves rather than positive? Is that a cultural thing, do you think?
I think a lot of it has to do with our environment and our input. When you look at little kids, some of them are very positive and some of them are very negative. And if you look at the way that they grow up and the people who surround them, they are usually mirroring a lot of what they see around them. And the same is true for us as we go throughout all of life. We end up taking on the attitudes and the outlooks of people who are closest to us. And so we have to be intentional. And the people who succeed are always intentional about what they're taking in. When we think about, I always see this in athletics, especially with the Olympics, you look at these incredible athletes and you say, okay, what makes them different? Sure, they might have a predisposition to a certain sport, but what sets them apart from everyone else is their input. the things that they eat on a regular basis, the kind of training they put their body through, the kind of thinking and coaching that they take in mentally, that is what sets them apart from all the other swimmers or all the other runners out there. And so the same is true for us. We have to be intentional because that is what shapes who we are as human beings.
Yeah, I think we have to be intentional about our input and our associations. Those are two really important ones because we're all shaped by those experiences. Some people have had, unfortunately, a lot of negative voices in their life or experiences that have beat them down and made them feel less than. And there's a lot of negativity that's just out there, period. So we have to be intentional about putting in positive material, helping to build our self-esteem and our confidence, especially when we have been beat down or tripped up by experiences throughout life.
Yeah, I find it's unusual to come across a leader that focuses on bigging up the employees, being very positive, playing down the small little things. Even as a child, people are trying to be protective, and they're more
Right.
likely to say to a child, don't do this, because they don't want to get them burnt or get themselves hurt. So they hear constantly, don't do this, don't do that, don't do something else. If you do so and so, this will happen, rather than the encouragement and the reward, the success to say, no, that's a brilliant job you've done there, and that's a lovely picture, and so forth. I think we're almost programmed to worry about the wrong things than encourage the good things.
So true, Dave. And like you said, it's not always ill-intentioned.
Right.
Sometimes it's with the best intentions, but we have to be really, it's the idea of catching people doing things right instead of catching them doing something wrong,
Yeah.
especially in a business context. We always, a lot of people just wait to say anything and instead of saying, oh, you did a really good job with that. But what we affirm is what we see more of. What we highlight is what gets repeated. So if we want to see more good behaviors, we shouldn't just be pointing out, oh, you messed up on this report or this wasn't good enough. If you reinforce those good things, people feel, wait a minute, if I did this kind of behavior, that made me feel really good when they told me, so I'm going to do that again. It's simple when you look at it very logically like that, but we have to reform our habits to those words of encouragement and catching people doing something right.
I think people also assume that others know when they're doing something right. And they don't, they don't know. We can't, unfortunately, at times read each other's minds, perhaps fortunately in other circumstances, but we can't read each other's minds. And so people don't know when they're doing something right. And that's why it's so valuable for somebody who's in a leadership position to call out the things that are being done well, because oftentimes employees will say in different performance reviews, I had no idea that wasn't what was expected of me, or I thought I was doing a good job, and the boss thinks something very different. And so we have to remember that across the board, we as people, we are starving for encouragement. We are wanting people to say, this is, a good job, or I really appreciate you, or I value you. Just giving a little bit of encouragement does a world of good for all of us. We all need it.
And it costs us nothing. I think that's, if you're looking to develop yourself as a leader, that's one of the qualities you should start with, is just to affirm the good that you see in other people, because it will set you apart as someone that people look up to
and want to work for.
They feel better about themselves when they're around you. And that's a quality that will then make you magnetic and give you more influence. So just start by a simple, encouraging word. Challenge yourself to give one compliment each day, and it's something so simple, but it will make a world of a difference.
Yeah. Do you think sometimes leaders are looking for perfection? I think there's a couple of dangerous words that are used, and that is but and however. So leaders start with saying, that was a really good job. I really like the way you did this, but because it's not quite exactly what I wanted. And so for a moment, the person they're speaking to are feeling fantastic. Their chest puffs out and they think really good. And then that destroyer of a word comes in and takes all that away and totally deflates the individual. So do you think leaders should try and get to the point just before the but and end the sentence and then move on?
I agree. And I think sometimes people feel afraid to give the encouragement because they think that it's going to make them not look as good. And that's, I think, what holds people back. And that's where those qualifying phrases come in where you're like, you did a good job, but I'm still better, or I'm still superior, like that's what comes through. And really though, a leader, if they make everybody else around them look good and succeed, that reflects well back on them. Instead of saying, I'm better than you, if your team isn't performing, if your team is not excelling, then what does that say about you as a leader? So the more you can empower them to be their absolute best and top the charts in whatever it is they're doing, the better that's going to reflect on you. So it's not going to take away from who you are if you compliment those other people.
Fantastic. I would like to ask you one more question, because I know the time is ticking now. Before I do, what's the best way people can find more about your company, your thoughts and beliefs, your training, etc.? What's the best way of going about that?
So one of the things we're most passionate about is helping people become that best version of themselves. So we've created a free 5-day challenge that will help you to begin implementing the right strategies and many of the things that we talked about today. So we will make that free challenge available to all of your listeners at aretios.com/bestlife. And that's ARETIOS.com/bestlife.
And then you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Aretios Official, and our website is aretios.com.
Fantastic. Now, you might have stolen my last bit of thunder there, because I've seen this thing called the Best Life Blueprint, and this is linked to what you've just said, isn't it? Is that right?
It is similar, yes. So our main philosophy for everything we do at Aretios is to help people live what we call the Best Life Blueprint. And so there's 3 core elements there. The first one is purpose. We believe that in order to live your best life, you have to be inspired by the purpose for which you were created. And that's what gives you meaning for everything that you do. And Candice talked about that a little bit earlier, of like, when you know that why behind what you're doing, it's a lot easier to persist through and to keep going. And then influence. We all need to develop our skills as leaders to be able to have a positive influence on those around us. And then to be able to embrace the adventure of life. That's the third element. So purpose, influence, and adventure, because life is best lived when we enjoy all of the adventure of it. We know that things don't always go as planned. So learning to be flexible, learning to enjoy that journey and do it with a community of people like we talked about is what it's all about. So that's our Best Life Blueprint.
Fantastic. It's been wonderful talking to you. I've really found this great fun. I've really enjoyed every minute of it. So thank you very much for sparing your time, because I know you guys are really busy. And I'm sure all the listeners will be really motivated by what you've had to say today. So thank you very much.
Oh, likewise, Dave. Thank you. It's been wonderful talking to you, and you're doing incredible things with your podcast and how you're inspiring people and sharing such wisdom. Even what you shared today was so helpful. And so we really enjoyed speaking with you.
I've never been called wise before, so I'll take it.
Oh, you definitely are.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again very much. And hopefully we'll talk again another day.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thanks then. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please subscribe and leave a positive review if you can spare a minute or two. If you would like to contact me, my email address is david@reallifebuyer.co.uk, or find me at Real Life Buyer on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, where you're welcome to direct message me. I look forward to you joining me on future episodes. Take care, and remember, save money and buy smart.